Napoleon is, and was, even in his own time, the great man of history. He was born in Corsica, a former short-lived island republic north of Sardinia that had declared its independence from Genoa just after its annexation by the French. He rose from minor nobility to become first consul following the coup of 1799, and then Emperor of the French after his self-coronation in 1804. The territory he held was larger than any ruler in Western Europe had possessed since the days of Charlemagne, and he finally brought an end to the institution that had been incarnated with his early medieval predecessor, the Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon rationalized the map of Europe, and even when it all came tumbling down, his geopolitical mark has proved indelible. As a teenager, Napoleon trained at the Military Academy of Paris. When revolution broke out, he became an ardent supporter of the Jacobins and distinguished himself in the Revolutionary Wars during the siege of Toulon, where royalists were holding out with the support of the Spanish and British. Instead of attacking the city directly, Napoleon insisted on placing his guns across the bay on the other side of the harbour. From this position, the Republicans could fire without fear of effective retaliation, and so they won the day. Napoleon was consequently promoted to take charge of the entire French artillery. When the Jacobins were overthrown by the coup of Thermidor, Napoleon was in a weaker position, having gone all in for the radical republicanism of Robespierre and company. He now had to prove himself as loyal to the new regime. Luckily for him, a Parisian uprising in 1795 provided him with the chance to show his dedication. He brutally crushed the royalist insurrection by ordering troops to fire on the crowd, killing several hundred people. With the political capital he had acquired, Napoleon went on what is known as his Italian campaign, where he established several satellite republics after the French model. A taste of the greater Napoleonic conflicts to come was to be had in Bonaparte's indirect war against Britain over the Ottoman Protectorate of Egypt, which he invaded in 1798. En route to Egypt, he captured Malta, which had been ruled by a holy order of knights since the early 16th century, totally overhauling the institutions of this relic of the pre-modern era where Jews and Turks were held in slavery. The Maltese held the French occupiers in contempt and welcomed Admiral Nelson's British takeover later that year. Although Napoleon was able to capture both Alexandria and Cairo and establish the discipline of Egyptology through the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, he could not hold them and was forced to withdraw due to British naval superiority. He attempted to portray himself as a liberator by drawing attention to the despotism of the Mamluks in his proclamations. Napoleon became first consul of the Republic in 1799. It's a title you may be familiar with if you are aware of Roman history. France did not really have a single figurehead in the initial years, where the presidency would rotate every 2 weeks in the National Convention. The Jacobins then ruled from the Committee of Public Safety, but the convention still held nominal power. Only in the Directory years from 1795 onwards did something analogous to a single representative emerge in the form of the Director. That an individual was named First Consul was a distinct break with the unprecedented precedent set by the Revolution thus far. After the Treaty of Luneville with the Holy Roman Empire was signed in 1801, brokering a truce with France and ceding territory at its northwest and southwest extremities, Napoleon was proclaimed consul for life, again aping the history of classical Rome, with the honours heaped on Julius Caesar following his great conquests and victories. The height of his hubris was yet to come, however, when, in 1804, he invited the Pope to France for his self-coronation as Emperor of the French. At this moment, many romantics who had followed Napoleon's glorious career with admiration for the overthrow of monarchs and coming of meritocracy became disillusioned, and Beethoven angrily scratched out the dedication of his Eroica Symphony. Following the Battle of Austerlitz in the modern-day Czech Republic against the Austrian Emperor and the Russian Tsar, Alexander I, the Holy Roman Empire, which was founded with the coronation of Charlemagne in 800 AD, was formally abolished, and the French client state of the Confederation of the Rhine inaugurated in its place. As master of Europe, Napoleon was known as the great standardizer and rationalizer. He reorganized the 234 territories of the Holy Roman Empire into 40. In all the lands he occupied, he promulgated what he knew as the Code Civil, and what we may refer to as the Napoleonic Code. This codified law across Europe on his model, decisively ending feudal property relations and providing a continental legal framework that survives to this day. Napoleon may have been obsessed with civil rights and constitutional law, but he was far from a democrat, and was later admired by Europe's next great conqueror, Adolf Hitler. Order, for Napoleon, was far more important than the people deciding what to do for themselves. Hierarchy and bureaucracy were necessary components of a functioning empire. Besides, they were the dictates of the general will, no matter the grumbles of a few vocal malcontents. French was to be the diplomatic language of the world, the tongue of officialdom. Dutch, Flemish, Italian and German would hopefully die out, but would not be actively suppressed. Napoleon met his western and eastern limits in Britain and Russia, respectively, and these two powers would be his ultimate undoing. Marching to Moscow overstretched his supply lines, and winter forced a long retreat and ended in coalition forces defeating him at Leipzig. Having been thwarted by Admiral Nelson at Trafalgar in 1805, Napoleon was defeated decisively at Waterloo, in modern-day Belgium, in 1815 by UK German forces. He was sent into exile on the British island colony of St. Helena, where he wrote his memoirs. After 25 years of upheaval, beginning in 1789, the political gains for Europe were modest, but not insignificant. Liberalism was on the rise. Industry had given birth to an emergent proletariat, but conservatism was very much the dominant cultural force, epitomized by the reactionary coalition of the Holy Alliance, comprised of Austria, Russia, and Prussia.